I forgave my daughter even when she replaced my cancer pills with sugar and watched me suffer for years. My name is Walter Clay. I am 71 years old, a grandfather of 2, and the last man alive who remembers what my wife's laugh sounded like when she burned the cornbread. I built barns, not empires, and what I own I paid for in sweat. 40 acres outside Abilene, a quiet rental duplex, and a lifetime of tools that only make sense in these hands. The skin across my knuckles remembers winters. My left thumb carries a thin white scar from a careless chisel, and the shed still smells like cedar even when the wind comes mean out of the north. Before the doctors learned a new word for me, our family moved by honest rhythms. Eleanor kept holidays straight with her recipe box and a pencil tucked behind her ear. I kept fences tight and roofs from complaining in February. Samantha called on Thursdays about school concerts and Saturdays about feed prices, brought the kids for Sunday supper, and slipped her hand through my arm when we walked to the mailbox. Her husband Trent carried chairs in from the porch without being asked. Ella's drawings crowded the fridge until the magnets gave up, and my grandson Ben followed me out to the pasture with a kite he swore could outrun a south wind. We were not perfect, no family is, but we were steady in the ways that matter. Show up, tell the truth, and leave the porch swept for whoever comes next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. When the doctor said the word, I did what men like me do. I squared my shoulders and set my jaw like a door against the wind. Stage 2, he said. Oral chemotherapy, he said. Manageable, he said, if you stay on schedule. The plan was oral chemo with a short course of radiation, pills in a green organizer, rides for the beams. Schedules, I understand. Feed, fence, fix. I have lived a long time by checklists and seasons. I told myself I could build a bridge over this the same way, one marked box at a time. That was late winter, when the calendar still smelled like rain and the fields wore their brown work clothes. Samantha cried in the parking lot. She is 40 now, the age her mother was when we mortgaged the first 5 acres. I remember thinking how strange it is when the child steadies the parent, and how pride is a heavier thing to hand over than any feed sack. She pressed her face into my jacket and promised I could lean on her, promised to handle the bills, promised the house would never feel empty. I wanted to argue about the bills, about the leaning, but the cold crept through my coat and I let her hold some part of the weight. A man breaks in little sounds if he won't let anyone hear the big one. In March, she kept those promises beautifully. She lined up my pill organizer with a green notebook beside it and wrote the times in a teacher's neat hand. She drove me to radiation and turned down the volume on old westerns like she was putting the whole world on a softer setting. She made soup that tasted like the kind Eleanor swore by and tucked a quilt over my knees without asking if I needed it. She held Ella on her lap and whispered that Grandpa was strong, and I believed her like scripture, not because I was blind, but because faith is where you choose to stand when the wind arrives. By April, the pain stretched its legs. The pills were supposed to be a leash. Some days the dog walked me. Nights got long and thin. I learned the particular hum of the refrigerator and the way the roof ticks when the temperature drops after midnight. That was when the little thing started to slip. A tablet under the table leg, white as a lost button. Another on the laundry room baseboard, as if it had rolled there of its own mind. Bottles that looked like they'd been opened with a hurry in the fingers. I told myself old men see ghosts when they're scared. I told myself grief can make you suspicious of the hands that help you. I said nothing. I have always preferred to measure twice before I speak once. In the 3rd month, my labs frowned. The oncologist adjusted the dosage and asked lightly if I'd missed any. I do not miss things, I thought. I am a man who shows up. Shame flushed my neck anyway, as if the numbers were a report card with my name at the top. I went home and began a notebook, boxes for every morning and night, a line for how I felt, a mark for each dose taken and the time beside it. I signed those boxes like a foreman signing off on joists, slow and square, telling myself that if there was a gap anywhere, it would not be because I forgot how to build. In early May, the wind came off the pasture smelling like wet pennyweed and old fence posts, and I told myself a man could still make a straight line through a crooked season if he kept his pencil sharp. My labs had frowned. My notebook had bloomed with little square boxes, each one signed in my slow, square hand. I was building a bridge over water I could not see the bottom of, one plank at a time. Samantha came on a Tuesday with grocery bags and a smile too tight at the corners. She set bread on the counter, soup in the fridge, her purse on the chair like a claim. "How are you feeling today, Dad?" she asked, bright as a waiting room lamp. "Like a barn in March," I said, "still standing. Needs shoring." She laughed, and the sound was almost the one I remembered from when she was 17 and backed the truck into the mailbox and tried to talk me into believing the post had jumped. She unpacked in tidy motions, labels facing out, corners smoothed, everything squared to the edge as if mess were a moral failing. I watched her hands the way a man watches weather, not afraid of rain, just trying to see it coming in time to get the hay in. She drifted toward the den. "Let me just check your meds," she said, light as dust. "Pharmacy changed the label again." "The label or the pill?" I kept my voice friendly, the way you speak to a colt you don't want spooked. "The label," she said quickly. "Same medicine. Insurance is always switching suppliers." She flipped the organizer open and closed with a click that sounded louder than it was. "We should simplify, Dad. Maybe keep them at my place and I'll bring over the day's doses. Less for you to track. I like seeing what keeps me alive," I said. "It behaves better when it knows I'm looking. I just want it easy for you." She reached for my green notebook, then thought better of it and left her hand hovering over the counter, a bird reconsidering a landing. We sat with coffee that went cold from too much talking around it. She told me about Ella's spelling bee and Ben's obsession with a kite that wouldn't mind wind direction. I told her the south pasture needed a new gate, and I meant to build it when my legs stopped feeling like borrowed lumber. When the clock thumbed noon, she glanced at the organizer, then at me. "Do you want to take your dose before we eat?" "Staying on schedule matters." "I will," I said. "After soup." I have never liked being told when to swallow. She nodded and smiled and fussed with a dish towel that didn't need fussing. "You don't have to be brave all the time," she said, not looking at me. "Brave's the word people use when they'd like you to be quiet," I said. It came out softer than it sounds written down. Something pinched behind her eyes. "I'm trying to help." "I know you are," I said, and I meant it in more than one direction. I set the spoon down and watched the surface of the broth settle. "Samantha, you and Trent doing all right?" Money-wise? It was a father's question that should never feel like cross-exam, and somehow it still did. "We're fine," she said, too fast. Then slower. "Things are tight. Insurance is a mess. Ella needs braces, and the school? Well, never mind. We're fine." "Tight isn't a sin," I said. "It's a season." I let the quiet sit a moment. "If you need help that doesn't involve my prescriptions, we can talk like people who share a last name." "Dad." The word came out like a warning and a plea stitched together. "Please just trust me to manage this. It's what you asked. I can keep the world straight for you while you get better." I thought of Eleanor with a pencil behind her ear and a recipe for lemon cake that never lied, of how she kept our world straight by writing the truth down where we both could see it. "Trust," I said, "and verify." "What?" she smiled, but only with her mouth. "Nothing," I said, and stood to fetch bowls. After lunch, she followed me to the den. She picked a thread from the arm of the chair and smoothed it flat with her thumb. "You took your noon dose?" she asked, a little too casual. "I will, in a minute," I said, and left the organizer closed. Her eyes flicked to the clock again, a tiny movement in a pretty face I had once wiped jam off of with the bottom of my shirt. She gathered her things to go. At the door she kissed my cheek and held on longer than a goodbye usually lasts. "Call me if you need anything," she said. "I will," I answered. "And you call me if you do." When her taillights disappeared down the road, I sat back at the kitchen table and opened the green notebook. Noon box, empty. Note beside it, delayed per visit, to be observed tomorrow. I traced the edge of the page with my thumb until the paper warmed under it. I wanted to be wrong so badly I could taste it. Pride will argue with evidence until the house sags. Love will argue longer. That evening, when the house settled and the coyotes tested the sound of their own voices out in the draw, I took the organizer to my workbench the way a man carries a puzzling board to better light. I didn't swallow. I did what a carpenter does. I tested fit and finish and feel. Some tablets met the tongue like a nailhead. Some met it like a peppermint he'd never bought. That sweetness doesn't belong to chemo. It was pressed sugar. Look-alike tablets meant to pass a glance, not a lab. I do not accuse people for the weather changing, but I do check if the roof is leaking. The next day I invited Samantha to the house again, for no reason I put in words. She came with a tote she said held craft supplies for Ella's school project and set it on the counter while she stirred soup. "We're making little models of planets," she said, too cheerful. "Sugar spheres." "Glue." "Sounds sticky," I said, and watched the way she stood between the tote and my den as if she were guarding a young tree from a stray goat. I refused the small, mean part of me that wanted to lift the tote's flap and ask what planet was shaped like an orange bottle. We ate. She rinsed bowls. She wiped a clean counter again. "I can come by every day this week," she said. "Keep you on track. Make it easier." "Come Sunday," I said. "Bring the kids." I have a story about a February calf that thinks it's a dog. Her face softened at that, and for a second I saw the girl who had slept in a fort of blankets on the living room floor and declared it a castle. "Sunday, then," she said, and left with the tote held careful at her side. I sat a long time after the door closed, listening to the tick of the kitchen clock and the creak the back door always makes when the temperature drops after 4. There are moments a man chooses what kind of father he will be to a grown child. The kind who looks away and calls it love, or the kind who puts the beam on the sawhorses and checks it for level, even if the house doesn't like what the bubble says. I sharpened my carpenter's pencil and drew a line in the notebook straight enough to satisfy Eleanor's ghost. That night I made 2 calls. One to the clinic to ask about chain of custody dosing and supervised administration. No drama, just procedure. One to a man I know who keeps eyes where a rancher can't always keep his own. Not because I wanted a courtroom. I wanted the truth that could survive one. In the morning, I walked the fence line slow, tapping each post with the head of my hammer out of old habit. The pasture doesn't mind being checked. People mind. But the house you keep in your chest is built from the same stubborn materials as the one you sleep in. I told myself out loud so the mesquite and the mourning doves could hear it. I will trust, and I will verify. And when the verifying is done, I will decide what forgiveness is worth and what it is not. I was sure that something went wrong. And if there would be no place for forgiveness, I aim for the revenge, the most extreme revenge there is. The next morning I let the clinic hold the reins. The nurse set the cup on a metal tray and watched me like a lighthouse, steady, not unkind. I swallowed under her eyes and signed my name beneath a timestamp that would outlive excuses. "We'll draw again this afternoon," the oncologist said. "We're building a picture." I nodded. Pictures don't lie if you frame them right. On the drive home, the pasture leaned into the wind, all that tough grass laying down and getting up again, and I thought about the kind of man I've been, the one who fixes, who forgives, who keeps the porch light on because a light is not a verdict. But forgiveness without truth is just rot with manners. I gripped the wheel and said it out loud so there'd be a witness. "We'll have the truth." Estrada came by that evening in a dust-colored truck that didn't mind gravel. He's not a talker, which I count in a man's favor. We walked the house once. I pointed. He nodded. The tools stayed in his case until he had my say-so. When he left, nothing looked different, which was the idea. Samantha arrived the next day with a thermos and Ella's math workbook tucked under her arm like a truce flag. "Pop quiz," she said with a smile that didn't reach where smiles are born. "What's the capital of Texas?" "Depends who you owe money to," I said. "But Austin for the rest of us." She laughed, too quick, then drifted toward the den the way a thirsty person drifts toward a sink. "How are we on meds?" she asked. "You know insurance keeps changing." "Clinic's helping me keep it straight," I said, casual as weather. "Chain of custody, they call it." "Sounds complicated." Her hands went still on the back of a chair. "You hate complicated." "I hate things that come apart under their own weight," I said. We ate soup that tasted of rosemary, and a conversation that tasted of metal. She watched the clock. I watched her watch it. When I stood to rinse bowls, she reached for the pill organizer with an absent-mindedness that had too much mind in it. I dried my hands slowly and left the organizer closed. "After we finish a hand of gin rummy," I said. "Doctor says cards are good for a fella's brain." She smiled with only half her mouth. "Since when do you listen to doctors?" "Since they started listening back." That afternoon, with the house quiet, I opened the green notebook. Noon, delayed, evening, clinic dose tomorrow. In the margin I wrote, "If love is a roof, then truth is the beam." The pencil left a groove like a furrow in the field. I could feel Eleanor at my shoulder, not telling me what to do, just reminding me of the difference between patience and pretending. The clinic called the next day with a voice I trusted. "Good news," the nurse said. "Levels look like they ought to after yesterday's dose. We'll keep monitoring, steady as a kind word." "Thank you," I said, and meant it in the bone. That evening Samantha stopped by just to drop off a casserole. She set it on the counter with care, then fussed with the dish towel, then fussed with the idea of fussing. "Dad, you're taking your pills on time, right?" "I can swing by mornings, too." "I'm on the clock," I said, "the kind that leaves a mark." Ella slipped in behind her, cheeks flushed from the wind, eyes taking in more than anyone ever gave her credit for. She pressed a folded paper into my palm, a drawing of a bell and a man beside it, lines careful as fence wire. "For later." "Do you still keep the lemon candies?" she stage whispered, like it was a password only we knew. "Later," I agreed, and tucked it in my pocket like a vow. When they left, the door side shut, and the house made its usual settling noises, the kind you only hear if you've loved a place long enough to learn its vocabulary. I sat at the table and listened to the kitchen clock tap out its verdict on each second. Waiting is work, if you do it right. 2 days more like that. Clinic dose, steady numbers, peace like a coin you don't spend. Home visits, nervous smiles, a hand that strayed where it shouldn't, peace like a coin that rolls under the fridge. On the third afternoon, the oncologist spoke plain. "Your labs dip on home days," he said. "They rise when we observe. Something's interfering." "I know," I said. The words were heavy and relieved at once, the way a beam feels when it finally finds its posts. That night I made the call instead of setting the table. I asked Samantha to bring the children Sunday. "I've got a story about a February calf," I said, and left it there like a nail you put in view so a thief wonders what else he's not seeing. Before bed I walked the fence line in my head, post by post. Some fathers close their eyes and make room for hope. I kept mine open and made room for consequence. If there was no place left where forgiveness could stand, then the beam had to be set elsewhere. A trust inked square, a bank between temptation and inheritance, the kind of justice that doesn't shout but holds. I slept lightly, like a man waiting for weather. And when the coyotes sang, I let them, because every creature tells the truth it knows. Investigation stretches time thin. You live in the inches between questions and answers, and you make a home there because you must. I told myself to treat it like a fence repair. Don't rip the whole run out in anger. Walk it post by post, find where it leans, and set it true. The clinic became my clock. Mornings, the nurse set the little paper cup on a tray and watched me the way a good foreman watches a roof, without blinking, without hurry, with care that doesn't need to announce itself. I signed beside each dose, a ledger of ink that said, "Here is what happened. Here is when." Afternoons, they drew blood and made their quiet faces over numbers. Evenings, I sat at my kitchen table with the green notebook and a pencil sharpened to a sting, and I wrote in the wide margin the sentence that held me together. If love is a roof, truth is the beam. I underlined the word beam so hard it left a groove in the page below. Estrada came twice more in a dust-colored truck. He doesn't waste language. We walked the rooms again. He adjusted what needed adjusting. "You're sure this is legal?" I asked. Not because I doubted him, but because I wanted to hear it out loud, to put the question into the air between us where it could be answered and filed. "Your house, your property, your consent," he said. "No sound in the bedrooms, no cameras where folks undress. You're fine." He slid a small device across my table. "You don't have to touch this unless I tell you." I didn't touch it. Nights were the hardest. A house you've loved a long time has a vocabulary, and mine spoke it all. The tick of the kitchen clock, the sigh of the hall, the way the back door announces the sunset by settling deeper into its frame. I lay there and listened and tried not to rehearse the words, "What if?" I tried not to picture my daughter's hands where they should not be. A man can make himself cruel in the dark if he gives himself the wrong script. So I wrote a different one, under my breath. Truth first, then justice, then forgiveness, if it can stand upright beside the first two. If I had to choose between being a gentle liar and a hard man who kept the grandchildren safe, then I would be hard and build them a house that wouldn't rot. The numbers told a story before any picture did. On the days the clinic supervised, my labs climbed like grass after a thunderstorm. On the days I dosed at home, they dipped. It is a simple thing, a line on a chart. It is also a verdict. "We're seeing interference," my oncologist said, neutral as a level on a board. "You're doing everything right here. Keep your home routine as usual. We'll keep watching." I heard what he didn't say. "Don't change anything yet. We're almost there." I called my attorney and asked for coffee at his office with the blinds half open to the May light. He's a quiet man whose desk is a tidy country, no hills of paper, nothing hiding in the brush. I told him about chain of custody dosing and numbers that rose and fell on a schedule that wasn't mine. I didn't offer theories. I offered facts and dates and copies. "We'll prepare the documents," he said. "Bank as trustee. Provisions for the grandkids, no contest clause. Clean lines." He looked at me over his glasses. "Do you want to leave anything, in any amount, to your daughter?" It's a cruel question if you don't understand what it's for. "I want to leave her the truth," I said, "and I want to leave the children a house that won't cave in because their mother leaned on the wrong beam." He nodded. "Then that is what we'll build." The first time Estrada brought me still images, I didn't look at them right away. I set the envelope beneath Eleanor's recipe box and made coffee I wouldn't drink. My hands knew what to do. Measure, pour, wait. So my heart could decide if it was brave enough to know what it already knew. When I opened the envelope, the air felt different, thinner, as if the house had taken a breath with me. The pictures showed exactly what the numbers had spelled. Hands in my den that weren't mine, a swap made quick and practiced, a small bag that had no place in a home that fights this hard to keep a man alive. Anger came polite, with its hat in its hands. Not the kind that smashes, the kind that sets a ledger on the table and says, "We'll do this right." I didn't shout. I didn't punch a wall and teach it a lesson it couldn't learn. I put the photographs back in their sleeve and wrote the date on the corner. Then I drove to the sheriff's office and asked for the desk where a report becomes paper that outlives memory. Elder abuse, medication tampering, evidence attached. I signed where they told me and handed over copies with my slow square carpenter's letters at the top. Paper is not poetry, but sometimes it's a prayer. On the way home, I pulled over at the south fence line and walked a stretch that always gathers wind. A hawk hung over the pasture like a nail in the sky. I thought about the men I've known, the ones who mistake fury for strength and the ones who know strength looks like a beam you can stand a piano on. Revenge is a hot word. Justice is a colder one. Mine would have to be the kind that held in summer and winter both. The extreme version, if you want to call it that, is simple. Make sure the person who tried to cash in on your death never profits from your life. And make sure the children are fed and taught and kept safe, even if it makes you look like the hard one at Christmas. The DA's office called after that. A voice practiced at sounding like a hallway with doors you can open. "We've reviewed the materials. We'll be in touch about next steps. Keep your supervised protocol. Don't confront. Don't confront." They say it because they've watched too many fathers try to fix what needs witnesses. I agreed. Then I went home and did the hardest work an old man can do. I waited correctly. Samantha visited 3 times in those days, each time with a different reason. Leftovers? Forms I supposedly needed to sign. A story about Ella's school project. I made room for her in my kitchen like I always have, and I made room for the part of me that still wanted to be wrong. I noticed the way her smile arrived late to her eyes and how she stood between the counter and the hallway like a gate that won't admit daylight. I asked ordinary questions. I listened like a carpenter listens for a squeak that tells him where the floor dips. I did not accuse. I did not forgive. I simply gathered truth the way you gather eggs. Careful, steady, expecting some to crack. At night I drafted letters by hand. One to Samantha, the kind you leave when you have to put a line where there used to be a circle. One to Ella and Ben for someday, folded small and slipped into the recipe box between lemon cake and pot roast. Your grandfather loved you. He set the house true. If anyone tells you mercy means looking away from harm, remember, mercy and truth were married long before you were born. I wrote my name under each in pencil first, as if I might erase it, then in ink. Back at the attorney's office, the trust papers grew into their final shape. Clear distributions for health, education, maintenance, and support until they are old enough to make mistakes they can survive. The bank's representative explained their duty like a teacher laying out rules on the first day of school. We answer to the document, to the court, and to the beneficiaries. We do not answer to the tempers of the living. I nodded. That was the point. Legacy over pride, house over hurt. On a Friday, the clinic numbers rose again like a field after rain, and I let myself think about the bell on the far wall and the way metal sounds when it tells you to hope out loud. On a Saturday, I stood at my workbench and sanded a length of cedar for no reason, except that cedar tells a man the truth about his own hands. I pictured Ella's head under my palm, the way she leans into comfort without apology, the way she had said lemon candies like a password. I felt my anger change shape into resolve so steady it didn't need a word. I am not fighting for my pride. I am fighting for the roof over 2 small beds, and the story those children will tell themselves about what love does when it is tested. When I washed my hands, I looked in the mirror and told the face there the rules I meant to keep. No yelling, no names you can't take back, no bargains with the truth. If forgiveness can stand in this room, it will stand beside justice, not instead of it. If it can't, then we will live with that too. The porch light was already on, though the sun wasn't down yet. Habit is stronger than weather. I thought of the beam, the roof, the children, and how a house is built to outlast the men who raise it. Then I dried my hands and went for some rest. Sunday came in on a south wind, and the house smelled like beans and hot iron and the sweet edge of cornbread. By then the DA had signed off on a quiet confrontation. Papers ready, no ambush, no shouting. I set the table the way Eleanor taught me, plates warming in the oven so kindness would meet the first bite. I laid the envelope of stills inside a little box on the placemat where my daughter would sit. I put my carpenter's pencil beside it, because a straight line deserves a witness. Then I heard tires on gravel. The screen door's old hinge cleared its throat. Ella ran in first, hair wild, cheeks high with color. My grandson followed with a kite under his arm like a promise. Samantha came last, the smile on her face arriving before it reached her eyes. Her husband hovered behind her, trying to take up the space of a decent man. "Grandpa, did you make the okra that pops?" Ella asked. "I did," I said, and let her hop twice in place the way she does when joy gets ahead of her bones. I gathered them in, the small warmth of them, and for a second I was only a man with grandchildren and supper on the table. We ate. I told the February calf story, and Ben asked if cows can learn to fetch. And I said I've seen stranger things on this land. Samantha laughed in the right places, but her hands never rested. She straightened a spoon that didn't need straightening. She glanced down the hall where my den sat open to lamplight. She poured water, then poured it again, as if clear could be made clearer. Betrayal doesn't feel like a thunderclap. It feels like a draft under a door you swore you weather-stripped. A thin line of cold finding its way along your ankle bone. I looked at my daughter across a table I built with the same hands she had held crossing the street, and all I could think was that trust has a particular weight, and I had given her mine to carry. She had set it down somewhere I couldn't reach. After dessert, I wiped crumbs from the table and let the kitchen clock tick 3 times so the moment could find its right shape. "How about you two go try that kite?" I said to the kids. "See if the wind remembers how to be friendly." I looked at her husband. "Go on with them? The field behind the barn is clean and the fence is tight." He nodded in relief. He didn't bother to hide. Ella glanced at her mother and then at me, an 8-year-old taking attendance of every adult in the room. "We won't be long," I told her, and kissed the top of her head. She smelled like soap and outside air. When the door closed and the house settled, I sat down across from my daughter. I took the small square box from the sideboard and set it between us. My hands did not shake. I have signed mortgages and buried a wife, and I know how to hold still when it matters. "What's that?" she asked, the brightness gone from her voice like light from a room when you flip the switch. "Pictures," I said. "A few that you and I need to look at together." She didn't reach for the lid. I opened it and laid the stills on the runner one by one, like cards in a game with only one ending. Her hands at my end table. Her fingers where my medicine lives. The neat swap for look-alike whites. I did not add words to those images. They didn't need any. Color left her face in a way I had only ever seen when she'd fallen hard as a child and lied to me anyway. "Dad," she said, and the one syllable was a rope fraying in her mouth. This looks like—" "It looks like what it is," I said. My voice surprised me. It wasn't loud. It was the sound a beam makes when you set it true and it decides to hold. She stared at the table, at anything that wasn't my eyes. "You don't know." "I know the numbers," I said. "I know what the clinic sees when they watch and when they don't. I know what my notebook says in my own hand. And I know what this shows. Those aren't substitutes, Samantha. They're sugar look-alikes, sweet on the tongue, deadly only in what they replace." I tapped a finger once on the photograph because I was still a carpenter, and wood teaches you to point at what you mean. She made a sound that wanted to be a laugh and failed. "You think I'd hurt you? You think I'd—" The word kill wouldn't come. It hung there between us, ugly and honest. "I think you told yourself a story you could live with," I said. "Mercy that looks like easing. money that looks like planning ahead. I think you stood in my den and said love out loud while your hands did something else. And I think you counted on me being the kind of father who would call that love because calling it by its right name would break us. The sentence hurt leaving my mouth. Truth has edges. Her eyes shone. Not tears, something meaner. You've always liked being the hero, she said. The man who saves everybody. This is you, making it big, making it noble. This is me, I answered, not dying to make your life easier. Silence sat down with us. In it, I remembered teaching her to swallow pills at 11, the way she'd screw up her courage, the way I'd say, it's not a mountain, it's a step. I remembered corn silk hair and knees scabbed from summer, a girl who used to sneak sugar from the canister and leave a trail on the counter that made Eleanor pretend not to see. Memory is a cruel mirror when it has to be. She flicked her gaze toward the door, toward the road, toward some imaginary exit made of denial. You can't prove, she began. I have already proved it, I said. I kept my hands folded, carpenter's palms up, because anger held down can turn into something worse. The people who keep records have what they need. The law will do its part, and the bank will do mine. What bank? She said it with a smallness I had not heard since she brought home a broken violin from 4th grade and was afraid I'd be angry about what we could not afford. The one that will mine the trust, I said. The ranch and the duplex are in it now. The grandchildren will be fed and taught and housed until they're old enough to stand on their own. There is a clause that says if you try to crack it open with a lawyer, you'll lose what might be yours. I could hear my wife's pencil in the words, plain and square. You can't do this. It came out more question than fight. I already did, I said, and felt the floor of the house answer under my feet like a friend. She looked at the pictures again. Her breath went ragged. I was trying to... It was supposed to... Dad, I didn't want you to... She couldn't finish any of the roads those sentences started down, because they all ended in the same place. Betrayal has a taste. It's metal and old sugar and a little dirt, like a penny a child puts in her mouth because it shines. I tasted it then, and I chose not to spit it back at her. I carried you out of a creek once, I said, and the memory came as clear as the day. Her skinny arms around my neck, the water thinking it had a right to her. You were 8 and mad at the current. You yelled at the river for moving where you wanted it still. I told you the water doesn't hate you. It just goes where it goes. You learn it or it teaches you hard. I slid the last photograph back into the box. This is the river teaching. She pressed her palm flat on the table as if to steady the room. What happens now? She whispered. Now the law does what it can, I said. And we... I had to stop there, because there was a we in my mouth, and it didn't fit the room we were sitting in. I swallowed and tried again. And I will keep the children safe. That is the whole of it. You'd take them from me? There was the fight, late and desperate. I will keep them fed and steady and taught what mercy actually is, I said, and I will not let anyone use their names as reasons to hurry my death. She flinched like I'd thrown something. I hadn't moved. That hurt more than if I had. The door opened then, the field giving back the sound of feet. Laughter carried in, bright and undeserving of the company it joined. I closed the box and set it aside. When the kids bounded in, cheeks bright, I stood and let them knock the air out of me with joy. A grandfather is a place you run to. Samantha stayed seated, hands curled empty in her lap. She looked 10 years younger and 20 years older. I felt the exact place inside me where the floor had given way and where I'd set new joists while no one was looking. Forgiveness was somewhere in the house. I could feel it. But it wasn't a trick of light or a cheap grace. It would have to find a place beside the beam marked truth and the one stamped justice, or it would not stand at all. Time passed. Yet Samantha came back swinging. By Tuesday there was a petition on the courthouse docket with my name on it. Emergency guardianship, incompetence alleged in careful, lawyerly ink. She'd stapled on letters from two acquaintances who hadn't seen me in years, and a printout of my own handwriting from the green notebook as if neat boxes proved confusion. She texted my sister-in-law that I was getting forgetful, called the bank to flag suspicious activity, and messaged Ella's teacher that Grandpa is declining. It was a scramble dressed up as concern, and it cut in places I thought were scarless by now. I am not a man who begs a river to run uphill. I hired the current instead. My oncologist signed a statement of decisional capacity, short and square. The clinic faxed dosing logs with timestamps that did not flinch. My attorney filed an answer that stacked facts like bricks. Supervised dosing days with therapeutic levels. Home days with dips. Photographs that didn't need adjectives. The judge looked over his glasses the way a man checks a bubble in a level and said, "Petition denied." He entered costs against her. The sound in my chest wasn't triumph. It was a house remembering it still had a frame. That was the moment I made myself a promise. I would carry out my revenge until there was room for forgiveness. Revenge, for me, meant the cold kind you can live with in the daylight. Consequences that hold. I told my attorney to file the civil claim for elder abuse and to seek restitution. We put a protective order in place. No access to my medications, my records, or my home without my say-so. We notified the pharmacy that no one but me could pick up anything with my name on it. I called the bank and removed every emergency contact who wasn't wearing a badge or bound by fiduciary duty. "Tight lines," the banker said. "Tight lines," I answered. Samantha tried another angle, sent a lawyer's letter threatening to contest the estate plan. The no contest clause did what it was built to do. It stood there like a post set in concrete and made the rest of the fence unnecessary. She went to church and cried in a bathroom mirror I had once helped hang, and 3 women I've known since the bicentennial called me to ask if I needed casseroles or character witnesses. "No," I said. "I need patience, and I have it." The DA moved, steady as weather. Formal charges, discovery, a plea on the table if it would spare the children a courtroom. I gave a victim impact statement that did not mention rage. I spoke about diminished trust, interrupted treatment, and the deliberate creation of risk. The judge listened with his head tilted like a man hearing a warble in a well-tuned engine. Samantha pled. Conviction entered. Education for offenders who harm the elderly. Supervised probation. Community service hours in the oncology wing whose halls she had hoped to empty sooner. Restitution, modest but real, garnished from wages that would now be earned with a mop and quiet shoes. She lost the right to be a signatory on anyone's health records for a while. She lost the story where she was the hero. "Is this enough?" my attorney asked afterward, a question that has no single right answer. "It's as far as revenge can go without becoming rot," I said. "The rest belongs to forgiveness, when it shows up honest." I made sure the grandchildren's days didn't bend around any of it. I kept their routines like fence posts at 12 feet on center. School, homework, Sunday supper, kites when the wind listened. I sent their mother's community service schedule to Trent, so pickups never failed. I added extra money to the trust's health and education allowance, so braces and book fairs would feel inevitable. I let Ella see me strong and steady as a porch beam, and I did not let her see the paper cuts. There were weeks where I thought forgiveness would never find a chair in my house. Then, one Thursday in June, I walked into the clinic for a follow-up and saw my daughter in gray scrubs wiping down infusion chairs between patients. Her motions were small and careful. She didn't see me. A man in the corner, bald, my age, asked for water, and without thinking, she pulled a fresh cup, tested the temperature on the inside of her wrist the way she used to test milk for her babies, and handed it to him with both hands, like the cup might be a thing that asked to be honored. I stood there with my name called somewhere I couldn't hear it and felt something give in my chest that wasn't a break. It was a hinge. The next Sunday, after we ate, I asked Trent to take the kids out to the pasture a minute early. Samantha stayed small at my table, waiting for the next blow. I set no boxes in front of her, No photos, no papers. Only an envelope with my slow, square pencil letters inside. I carried out everything I meant to, I said. I will protect the children and the land until I am done breathing. Nothing about the trust changes. Nothing about the boundaries changes. You will earn what you can earn, in years and inches, and that will be between you and time. She watched my mouth like a person reads weather. But I am done with revenge, I said. I am finished making sure you feel it every day. I forgive you, completely. Not because you deserve it, because Ella asked me once if mercy could be true, and I intend to raise her in a house where the answer is yes. She didn't cry the way I expected. She deflated, like a porch cushion losing sun. What do I do with that? She whispered. You live under it, I said. Like a roof. She nodded once, a motion so small it could have been a wind shift. I slid the envelope across. Inside, the note was brief. For what you called mercy, I have given mercy back. I forgive you. I remember. The beams stay set. That was the whole of it. The protections remained. The porch light stayed on. And when I walked her to the door, we stood a moment in the old hinge squeak and the June heat. Two people who had broken the house and chosen, each in our way, to keep living in it without letting the rot return. By late summer, the numbers on my charts had steadied, and the story had too. The guardianship whisper died the way a wind dies at sundown. The clinic logs and the court record did their quiet work, and the truth sat where it belonged, plain as a level on a board. I watched Samantha finish her community service in gray scrubs, carrying water and listening hard, and I let the last sharp edge in me dull. I told her, out loud and without remainder, that I forgave her. The ledger between us closed. The protections stayed. Sunday suppers found their rhythm again. Ella quizzed me on spelling while her brother ran the yard with a kite that finally learned the wind, and Samantha came early to set plates without rearranging the past. We did not reopen what the law had settled or what the trust now holds. We spoke of beans, homework, and the south fence. When she said thank you, she meant both the meal and the mercy, and I answered both with the same word. Always. At night I walked the porch and touched the post where the beam meets true. Truth has been restored in this house, not by forgetting, but by putting each piece where it belongs and leaving it there. Forgiveness, once chosen, keeps choosing. The porch light stays on, not as an invitation to deny what happened, but as a promise that this home stands, square, steady, and ready for whoever learns how to come home.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.